Game of Thrones Season 2. A quick disclaimer, the no spoilers in the title actually refers to the fact that there's no spoilers for Season 2 in this review. I'm going to completely spoil Season 1. If you want to know what Season 1 is like and get an introduction into Game of Thrones without it being spoiled, I'll link my Season 1 review in the description below so you can take a look at that. But I'm going to spoil Season 1 here. If you haven't seen Season 1, don't watch this video. You're going to completely ruin it for yourself, and don't do that because this is a great show. But anyway, without further ado, you've had your chance. Here we go. So yeah, we're finally in Season 2. The world is still reeling from the death of Ned Stark at the end of Season 1. And just the whole world is up in arms about that. There's about 50 different kings who want in on the Iron Throne action. Joffrey is the illegitimate king on the throne, and he's being allowed to stay on there. And these are some of the issues that we have to deal with this season. Tyrion, thank God, has become Hand of the King in place of his father until he arrives at King's Landing, which, you know, gives him an even bigger role in this story, and thank God, because again, he is the best character in the world, seriously, guys. Stannis Baratheon, who was only referenced in the first series, now becomes a legitimate player in the story as the one of the only surviving legitimate brothers of Robert Baratheon, therefore one of the only living legitimate heirs to the throne that should be there instead of Joffrey. Jon Snow, Ned Stark's bastard, is now going north of the wall. You know, north of that big wall that everyone's complaining about in Westeros. He's going north of that to where the wildlings are, where the White Walkers are. He is going to see some great stuff. Still a pretty boring character, but I'll get into that in a minute. Arya Stark, Ned Stark's youngest daughter, who has practically witnessed her father's death, is now in hiding, disguised as a young boy, and she also develops into one of the most interesting characters in the story even further. Sansa Stark, Joffrey's wife and Ned Stark's daughter, you feel so bad for her being wed to Joffrey, because Joffrey is a little horrible person. We're going PG on this Game of Thrones talk. In this season we have to watch her story as she has to deal with this horrible, horrible life in King's Landing that she's having to deal with. And these are all of the different threads, and I'm even missing a few out to try and tell you this to you, but that's the simplest way I can put it without going into it too much and spoiling it. There was a lot going on in Season 2, far more than there was in Season 1, and that is sort of an issue for this season. Now, I'm not going to repeat a lot of the stuff that I said for Season 1, or at least I'm going to try not to. You've already heard that, and there's no point in me saying it again because a lot of the brilliant stuff from Season 1 carries over to Season 2. So I'm going to make a lot of references to Season 1 and say how this season fares in comparison. I don't need to tell you again that the characters in Game of Thrones are spectacularly written. I don't need to tell you whether it's gory or not. I don't need to tell you these things. You can see them in that first review. If you haven't seen it again, watch it. It'll contextualize this one a lot better. Basically, I'm not going to repeat myself, ironically, as I repeat myself. That makes sense, doesn't it? Season 1 was spectacular. How can it get worse than that? It's got to be better, hasn't it? It has to be better, and unfortunately, no. Season 2 is not better than Season 1. It's actually a marked step down. It is still very good. Very, very good stuff, don't get me wrong, but it is definitely a step down from the peaks that Season 1 reached. And there are a number of reasons for that. One of them is being the fact that there is so much going on this time around, even more than the first movie. It's not a movie. It's not a movie. Even more than there was in the first series this time, and it unfortunately brings it down somewhat, but only somewhat, you know. It's not horrible, it's just there are some moments in Season 2 which drag on a bit where, and there's going to be not much happening, but this season is still very rewarding, still very gratifying, and it's still very much worth the watch. It just, again, doesn't reach the same peaks as Season 1. That said, there are improvements as well. For example, something I didn't mention in my first video is that there was a certain aesthetic to the first series and that everything was very, very grey. Season 2 takes the liberty of actually upping the colours somewhat. Not unrealistically, this isn't a bright and vibrant world, a bright and colourful world that looks inviting. No, it's just that the colours haven't been purposefully muted out like they were in the first series to make it look more gloomy, presumably. No, this time we have real colour, and I've got to be honest, it looks so much better this time around. It really does. And I really hope they don't revert back to the colour scheme of Series 1, because now I've experienced this, I can't live without it. It's really good. Like Daenerys Targaryen's clothes in the back, like her bright blue in the backdrop of everything else that's going on, you know, the deserts. It really is a brilliant colour scheme now, and it looks fantastic. Also, a lot of these new threads are very interesting. For example, now we're starting to get a bigger insight into many of these characters. Now that the world has been set up sufficiently by Season 1, we can now dig deeper. For example, something I didn't mention a second ago, Theon Greyjoy, who you might remember from the first series as being alongside Jon Snow and Robb Stark. He gets sent in this series off to his home island town thing, because obviously he is not actually a Stark. He's just been brought up as one because his father sent him to live with the Starks. And now he is going back to try and recruit the Iron Islands, to be on the side of the Starks. And this leads to a whole series of complications that I won't go into, but needless to say, there are some family tensions since he left. And this gives the character, who was a pretty small player in the first season, a lot of depth, and he actually gets brought to the front and we learn more about him, and that's very interesting, and I very much appreciated that. It was also very interesting to see how Arya Stark dealt with her new status as a common boy, and how she dealt with that being mixed in with all the other actual common boys. That was very interesting, and she continues to be one of the most interesting characters. I haven't read the books, but I very much look forward to what she's going to bring in the future, and you can't help but feel sorry for her as well. She has a very hard time. She makes friends with a boy called Gendry, who we saw in the first series briefly as a blacksmith's son. He is actually the bastard son of Robert Baratheon, unwittingly, of course, so he will have a part to play later on as well, but again, won't spoil it. Jon Snow crosses the wall to the Waste, the Wildling country, the White Walker country, and he stops at a place called Craster's Keep with his fellow Night's Watch peeps. Peeps. And Craster's Keep itself was very interesting, dark sort of setting. It's quite disturbing in the same way, in many of the ways that Game of Thrones has always been disturbing, that sort of thing, which, again, won't go into, keeping it spoiler free, but that's an interesting story by itself, and he's obviously with his friend Samwell, who is basically Samwise Gamgee in this show, but we'll let that slide. And whilst the stuff happening around Jon Snow is interesting, his character for the whole season is yet again not that interesting. I just don't find him. There's not much to him yet, and I imagine there is going to be some again. I imagine eventually he's going to come into his own, but we've waited 2 seasons now, and in my personal opinion, he hasn't yet come into his own. In this season, we get deeper looks into Joffrey as king and how he handles being king and how he deals with it, and he is such a hateful character who does such a good job, Jack Gleeson, of playing this disgusting, horrible, horrible boy. And it's hot. And the way Sansa has to deal with this, the way Sansa has to deal with his absolute megalomania. That works, I think. Megalomania. The way she has to deal with that is sometimes very heartbreaking. Like in the first series, she was kind of annoying. She was the spoilt brat teenager, but now you can't help but feel sorry for her, and you really want her to escape the clutches of this disgusting, disgusting boy. And the new players of Stannis Baratheon, they all add a new layer of depth, but also it begins to dilute. It begins to dilute the story somewhat, and whereas the first series did a fantastic job, as far as I'm concerned, of being in so many different places each episode, and sometimes in some episodes completely getting rid of some characters in order to focus on certain ones here. This series does a worse job of that, and it's not necessarily the fault of the series. I mean, they are at the mercy of what George R.R. Martin wrote in his novels, aren't they? They have to go with that story somewhat. It's a pretty tough thing to do, considering one book of that series is 1,000 pages long, which is a Lord of the Rings trilogy long. That's pretty nuts, and they have a few books to work with. So I sympathise, but that doesn't change the fact that this is a problem. 1 minute you're with Arya, the next you're with Tyrion, the next you're with Daenerys, and Daenerys herself, actually, that's another problem. In the first season, I complained that she wasn't quite coming into her own yet. But not in the same way Jon Snow isn't. She clearly has big things destined for her, and you really, really want to see what those are. That's her problem, though, is that you're always like, Daenerys, she is such a cool character. Please, please, do all these cool things. But she isn't getting around to it yet. And they're building up to it, fair enough again. I give them a pass. They're building up to it, and I'm sure it's going to be incredible. She now has her 3 dragons, which are just going to grow and grow and grow. But this season, the big problem is that she stops at a place called Karth, and most of what happens in Karth I didn't find as interesting as what was going on everywhere else. It's not anywhere near as interesting as it was in the first series, watching her interact with the Dothraki horde. It's just not on the same level. Karth I found to be a pretty boring place for her to be, and that's a problem. It's not awful, but it is an issue. And it's essentially just all these different things going on, all the different parts of the world that it has to keep jumping between. Again, it just dilutes it, and it makes sometimes you're going to go so long without anything actually happening. I mean, things are always working towards things happening, but there's not always like this event where you can go, oh, God, that was cool, like you had in season one fairly often, enough. And you can feel the gap between important things happening sometimes, and that's a problem. But it really isn't bad. It's still a very, very good season. For example, it ends on a bang and it makes everything instantly gratifying, instantly rewarding, and that's not to say it's bad. Everything I've said, it's not bad. It just dilutes it somewhat. It takes it down a level from the first series. It's just a little bit worse, and I've identified the reasons for that. But again, if you finish season one of Game of Thrones, you're not going to stop watching, are you? You're not going to stop watching Game of Thrones and think, oh, that ending was good, but season two's apparently only a little bit worse than that. I guess I'm going to have to steer clear. No, you're going to carry on and you are going to watch season two, and you might be disappointed in that it wasn't as good as season one, but as far as entertainment goes, it is still some of the best out there. So I give season two of Game of Thrones an 8 out of 10. Still a really fantastic TV show, and I can only hope that they improve again, back up to season one levels. A little bit of a step down this time, but seriously, it is still massively worth your time, and you have to just keep going, keep going. It's really, really, really great. It's good. It's not bad. Even just to watch Tyrion do his thing, because he does his thing good. I like that dwarf. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. That was my review of Season 2 of Game of Thrones. If you want to see more of these reviews, please like at the bottom, but you don't really have a choice in some ways, because I'm going to review Season 3 for you tomorrow. Yeah, I binge-watched this a little bit more than I should have. Season 3 will be coming tomorrow. No spoilers for Season 3 again, but regardless, thank you so much for watching. Please like and favourite in the boxes below. You know what to click. Subscribing would be even better. It helps me more than you know. Again, thank you so much for watching.